Sometimes people fight over languages as whose language is the oldest. It is pointless, friends. Let me tell you why. Right after the flood of Noah, which wiped out the entire face of the earth, people were speaking the one language that Noah and his sons spoke in the ark because they were the ones that replenished the earth. Apparently, there wasn't a standard written language then, and still poets composed rhyming poetries and they sang them with rhythms to the accompaniment of dances. For example, the ancient Vedas of India, though were composed around 3300 BC, they didn't have a written form until 1400 BC. Then there is another incident that people relate to when it comes to the birthing of languages. It is the confusion of tongues at the Tower of Babel. However, contrary to the common belief, this incident did not affect the whole world. One can realize it if they study the table of nations of Genesis chapter 10 and where the people settled after the confusion. Furthermore, there were people in India and in China. They weren't affected by the confusion of tongues. In fact, within the next 50 years after the Tower of Babel incident, Noah's son Ham traveled through India from the south all the way to ancient Bactria. Language was not a barrier for him. The Tamils know him as Manmadan and remember him even today as a very charming and articulate person. By the way, he is believed to be the author of Kama Sutra. This time period we are talking about here was around 3100 BC. Then, a few decades later, when the biblical Cush and his men entered ancient India through the Gujarat region, Lord Krishna was one of them. In fact, he was invited as a chief guest to one of the Sangams, which is a gathering of dignitaries of local and foreign countries convened by the Pandya king of South India. Krishna did not face any problems understanding the language because the world was still speaking the same language that Noah spoke. Now, do you know that the Pandyas, as well as the Cheras and Cholas of the days, were not speaking a specific language called Tamil? They had come from north of Himalayas. The Velvikudi inscriptions from the 8th century clarifies their origin. They were Japhetic, meaning they were the descendants of Yayati, who was given the Mediterranean islands and the cold north when Noah's sons divided the earth among themselves. Here's their genealogy as per Hinduism. In fact, they used a title such as Sarangadwaja, Malayadwaja, and so on, which doesn't sound like Tamil at all. I'm not making this up, friends. This has been mentioned in Mahabharata. Today, who even considers all this? Then the shipping industry started booming and the international commerce started taking shape. Representatives of different trading nations convened conferences to standardize measuring units such as weights and measures, seals and symbols, just like Hammurabi did in the Near East. Tamil literature talk about such conventions convened by Pandya kings, which also involved poets. Obviously, there would have been a segment of time when they presented their literary work to the guests to entertain them. People who visited them from other countries understood them perfectly. However, this is when Lucifer the devil stepped in. Now, I have been always claiming that the devil operates from his abyss in the oceans. He has a God-given assignment to establish a perfect and lasting kingdom upon the earth. So he strategizes to influence people and build his kingdom. When God confused their language in Sumer, he sent a half-fish and half-human creature named Oannes from his abyss under the water to the border of Babylonia, where the language confusion had taken place, and taught them the written language and everything else needed to run a society. Another short creature named Agastya, which sported a tail, gave grammar to Tamil language. And similarly, an odd-looking Allah taught Arabic language to the Arabians. But one thing is clear. While some languages like Egyptian or Humanifods, many languages have emerged from Lucifer's abyss. Now, don't you think that Lucifer could have given all the people the same scripts and the same grammar? He won't. That's where his strategy of dividing humans and pitting them one against another begins. Today, how old a language is decided by who owns the oldest literature. It is not a bad idea, even though it is not accurate. Having said all this, we are able to see that the languages have come from one single source, namely Noah's family. However, due to the confusion of tongues, Lucifer's intervention upon languages, enmity between people groups, geographical separation such as mountain ranges between people groups, invasions and imposition of foreign languages on the conquered lands, and such things have drifted us so far apart that we forgot the origin of human language. However, if we start fighting over languages today, we will be walking straight into the trap of the enemy whose job is to divide and conquer us. Thanks for watching.